What is the mobile home park desktop? With a proper shout out to the NBA desktop put on by Jason Concepcion and The Ringer, you can think of the the mobile home park desktop as a short video where I bring news and analysis about the mobile home park industry from my desktop. My focus here is not on production value, as you can clearly see, as much as it is just bringing together bits and pieces of news that I have found interesting and many others who are following the industry may find interesting as well. For more about who I am, stay tuned to the end where you'll see a short bio. And with that, let's jump straight into the news and the question that's on everyone's mind: how are mobile home park rent collections being affected by COVID-19? As the nation watches as staggering unemployment numbers unfold, as you can see here, jobs created since the Great Recession from 2001, 2010 from 2010 to 2020, 24.8 million. And then we have the initial jobless claims that happened 3 weeks ago, and then the latest, and now the latest on top of that. So altogether, if you add it up, 7 plus 3, 13 plus 6, so about 20. It's about 20 million. And we had about 8.7 million total job losses through that entire, through the Great Recession. At its, from peak to trough, was about, from its low point to its high point, about 8.7 million. With this amount of job losses, people are understandably worried and concerned and curious to know what rent collections are going to look like for April. So now we're starting to see the first real data being collected. Here I want to show you the data presented by the National Multifamily Housing Council. So this is focused on apartments. There are about 13.4 million apartment units that they are tracking. And what they've done here is they've shown you a comparison of how rent collections look for the week ending. So you can see there, the week ending April 5th, 2020. This is what the rent collections were like last month. And this is what rent collections were like a year ago. So a year ago, in April 2019, about 82% of rents were paid by the week ending the 5th. That compares to about 81% that was paid by the 5th last month. And this month, you can see that there is a significant drop off to 69% of rents being paid, which is about a 13% drop off year over year from last year, and a 12% drop off from last month. Now, this is only through the week ending the 5th, so hopefully those numbers will continue to improve over time, but at least we can see from a relative scale what the pain might be like for the multifamily industry, and we can use this as a baseline to kind of think through what it might be like for the mobile home park industry as well. Another data point that I was looking at had to do with sales of mobile homes that was talked about in UMH's earnings call. UMH is the third largest REIT, publicly traded REIT in the mobile home park sector. They have 23,100 sites and 122 parks. And when asked the question about how coronavirus was affecting sales, here is what Sam Landy had to say. Sam Landy is the CEO and president of UMH. The question was, has there been any sort of deceleration here in February, particularly as sort of news flow surrounding coronavirus has picked up? Or are people still coming in with the same pace as they were maybe earlier in the quarter? His answer, we actually checked with every regional manager. There's no decline due to the good weather. And due to the good weather, we're busier than ever. Nobody in any of our communities that we know of has lost a job or has less work because of this coronavirus. We have had no changes in occupancy. So that was a good early sign. But again, that was March 6th of 2020. And that seems like a lifetime ago now. So this is an interesting stat. At least early on in this crisis, things seem to have been moving along smoothly for UMH, and we'll continue to have to track to see how things are progressing as the months unfold. Undoubtedly, with unemployment claims as high as they are, every asset class is going to be affected or going to experience some type of drop-off in rent collections. So another big question on everyone's mind: how will the mobile home park industry do in relation to other industries? In other words, how stable or volatile will the industry be? Talking to some insiders, I basically have heard two major schools of thoughts emerge. One school of thought is that the industry is going to get hammered. Not necessarily in April, but in months to come, as mobile home park residents are among the most vulnerable to unemployment, as many work in direct service capacities where remote work is simply not possible. This might be very market specific, of course, and will depend a lot on how long these lockdowns last and how quick the recovery is. But given that mobile home park residents work in retail and restaurants and generally have less in savings, a prolonged stint of unemployment could lead to some serious economic hardship, and paying rent might prove to be more and more difficult for many of our residents. Another school of thought, however, and the one I've heard much more often, is that the MHP industry has many factors working in its favor. First and chief among them is that the MHP mobile home park industry is the cheapest form of non-subsidized housing that's available. There's going to be a massive stimulus package being unleashed by the federal government that includes increased unemployment benefits and checks cut directly to American households. With this second school of thought, the MHP industry, as with the last recession, will prove to be more resilient and less volatile, as any loss in occupancy that the industry faces from current residents will be replaced by downsizing of other residents in our asset class. And in fact, one of the statistics that I had read about in talking about the 2009 crisis was that in 2009, 50% of all new mobile home park residents were former single-family home residents. So that sort of lends credence to the fact that during these recessions, as people downsize, we start to see the trickle-down effect and have people start to move into our industry from other forms of housing. As far as me personally, I'm going to continue to follow the news, follow the data, and look for that signal in the noise that helps me predict what I think is going to happen long term. But overall, I'm still very bullish on the industry in general. And as everyone needs a place to live and we have the most affordable housing options available, and as the industry in general continues to improve the type of housing that we're able to provide, I think that it makes us more resilient to these types of downturns. And on a side note, I saw this interesting article here in Forbes magazine online, and it basically talked about how what housing choices for millennials could be like and how they could be changing in a post-coronavirus world. And so one quote that was very interesting, we could see a further surge in the relative popularity of single-family homes among renters, whereas in apartment buildings where tenants are in closer contact by necessity, sometimes packed into elevators to get to their floor, a detached home allows for much easier social distancing. This could accelerate a shift that was already occurring, and this shift that they were talking to was a shift from apartments to single-family rentals or ownership. But the same dynamic also exists for mobile home parks in terms of it being much easier for social distancing, and we have a much cheaper price point for people to get into mobile homes. So maybe this is a point of marketing that should be really pushed post-COVID, post-virus, mentioning among the many attributes of living in a mobile home park, the fact that it's easier to social distance. As I gather and hear more news on rent collections, I'll continue to either update in this format or on my blog that I will be launching soon. Of course, it's also said that you should never let a good crisis go to waste. So in that vein, the question arises, Well, is now a good time to buy a mobile home park? To answer that question, I think it's important to go back to some basics. Whenever you invest in anything, what are you really doing is you're buying future cash flows. So the first question I think you should be asking yourself if you're thinking about whether now is the right time to buy is, how confident are you in predicting future cash flows? Future cash flows for multifamily or mobile home parks are based in large part on rents and rent collections, rent increases. So what we're really trying to predict goes back to how we started this entire video. What do we think future rent collections are going to look like? And what do we think future rent increases are going to look like? How confident can we be right now in predicting those future cash flows? If you're someone that's waiting to see how all of this unfolds, then you're probably not very aggressively looking at deals. On the other hand, if you're someone that feels like this is going to be a quick recovery, or there's other factors at play that make you confident about what future cash flows might look like, then you could be looking more aggressively about pursuing deals and maybe focus more on pricing and terms. Which brings us to number 2. In today's market, what should, and given the uncertainties, how should we be pricing those future cash flows? So if we do have a sense for what those future cash flows are going to be like, well, what should the price of those future cash flows be like? Every investment is priced relative to alternatives available and the relative safety and effort and liquidity of your alternatives. So the question is, are you getting the right pricing or terms for today's market? How can you de-risk your investment? So if you do decide that you are going to buy, how can you de-risk it? Can you push out your due diligence period longer? Can you have longer periods to work with your lenders to find financing? What are some ways that you can de-risk the prospect of buying properties in today's market? And finally, a good question to keep in mind if you're thinking about buying now is keep in mind that market prices are not set by sellers. They're set by buyers. So if you're looking to buy now, you should ask yourself, who's your competition and what are they willing to pay? If you are the only person that's willing to buy, then you would think that you should get a pretty good reward for being able to take on that risk. What I would call a risk premium. Are you getting a proper discount for the fact that maybe you're the only one that's willing to buy? And if there are no other competitors that you're going up against for these deals, is it possible that the deal will still be there in 3 or 4 months? So that's another thing you should be factoring in. If there's no one else looking for that deal, what's to say that that deal is not going to be around in a few months? And would it be better for you to wait at that time? So these are all some questions that you could be asking yourself now when you're trying to determine whether or not it's the right time to buy, whether you should be jumping in. If you want to hear more opinions about whether you should be buying now or waiting, or what type of triggers might make you buy now, here's an interesting webinar I saw put on by Michael Blank. Together, he and his panelists control over $1.5 billion worth of assets. In this webinar, they express their opinions on how their properties are doing, what the capital markets are like now, and what they predicted the capital markets would be like in the future. They made some short and long-term predictions, and they answer the question about whether they are buying now and what would trigger them to buy, what would be some of the conditions they'd be looking for to buy, if they were to buy. I'll include the links below as well as links to all the other articles. And yes, this webinar format did remind me of the beginning of every episode of the Brady Bunch. All that was missing was Alice in the middle. I guess Andrew Cushman is Alice in this example. All right, I'm beginning to make Brady Bunch jokes. I can sense that my attention and yours too must be waning. I hope you enjoyed this first edition of the Mobile Home Park Desktop. Look for links below to all the articles referenced in this short video. If you have any questions, feedback, comments, please respond. If you have specific suggestions for future content ideas, please let me know. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe to whatever format you're watching this in, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube, etc. Share it if you think others might find value. My goal is to help bring you the latest and greatest mobile home park news from my desktop. Thanks for watching.